Good afternoon, everyone, and I think we are back live now. So let me just ensure that hope everyone is hearing us. So we are back with our session. We hope you had a lovely lunch. My name is Ayin. I am the founder and lead consultant of the Fashion Arch, and I will be the moderator for this afternoon's session, which is about people power, where we're talking about how we can connect people to causes while creating a community of leaders. On the panel for this afternoon, we have Giselle Mendez of the Volunteer Center of Trinidad and Tobago. We have Jennifer Massiah of Habitat for Humanity, as well as Phillis Griffith of Shift Caribbean and New Beginnings Education Center. Good afternoon, ladies, and thank you for being here with us. All right, so we will start first with Giselle out of VCTT. So if you could just give us a bit, Giselle, in terms of what you do in terms of your organization and why you decided to embark on such a project, receiving grants as well too from the GFSGP.
Sure. Thank you so much, Ayin. And of course, pleasant good afternoon to everyone, and kudos for the entire New Fire team for pioneering such an important initiative, bringing together fellow servants, Jennifer Massiah, and of course, other fellow colleagues. Really great to be here with you all this afternoon. In terms of my role at the Volunteer Center of Trinidad and Tobago, I guess from a title point of view, it's Initiator and Chief Servant Bottle Washer and all that encompasses. But in terms of the mission and at the heart of the organization, it's really about creating a culture of care that places people at the heart of positive change. At VCTT, we are sold out and resolute around the importance of volunteers, the importance of people stepping up in their respective spaces with whatever their capacity may be to really help initiate positive change. Over the past couple of years, since VCTT has been in existence, 9 years to be exact, we turn 9 this year, the organization's model has been evolving. Initially, we very much focused on connecting skilled volunteers to NGOs, community-based organizations, similar to New Fire. We've supported New Fire over several of their events. But over the past 2 years, we really took a deeper look at the concept of and the potential, let me say potential, of connecting people to causes and what would be the most appropriate model to really fuel and drive deep impact. With that in mind, we pivot and we transitioned over the past 2 years to now very much curating custom-built interventions that very much support the Sustainable Development Goals. So the SDGs very much provide a framework upon which we really focus in terms of understanding the measure of impact that we're having and also understanding the type of impact that we would like to have. As it pertains to the Sustainable Development Goals, we strategically focus on 3 areas. First, our first priority is on quality education, and the intervention that we have in place supporting that is a mentorship intervention. The second Sustainable Development Goal we focus on is zero hunger, right? And the intervention supporting that relates to why I'm here this afternoon, which is the Grown in East Port of Spain initiative. And the third intervention we have in place is our Caribbean Volunteer Exchange Network. And again, that very much focuses on partnership for the goals. So again, the SDGs are really important framework underpinning our work and really guiding us to that long view of impact we are working to have.
Okay.
Grown in East Port of Spain initiative. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. No, I was just going to say, because just as you're getting into, you said to the Growing in East Port of Spain, because the next question was actually about impact and what you've been doing in terms of the lives and the projects that you've been working on. How have you impacted persons? So if you could give us a bit about that new project.
Sure. So the Grown in East Port of Spain initiative actually was inspired by a pilot project we did in 2018 in the Gonzales community, where we brought together a series of stakeholders, because at VCTT, we really believe and live the principles of collaboration. And we pioneered a food park in the Gonzales community. And I think from that, we learned, it really reinforced for us the potential of food spaces in communities, and not just communities, but also urban spaces. Further to that as well, that was the leverage point upon which we applied for further support from Jeff, and within our current goals are around expanding food spaces in the East Port of Spain community. The real goals driving that are around food security and livelihood development. The communities that we're working with towards this intervention are Silots, Gonzales, Monrepo, Chinapu, and recently we've also begun having serious discussions with the Basilon Street community as well. So East Port of Spain is our community of focus. Throughout our consultations and research in terms of working with the communities, it's really reinforced the level of need and support, especially as it pertains to food, right? And from our context and perspective, as it pertains to urban farming, there are several factors that we are working towards. Of course, you have limited space in these urban areas. You do have communities where there are vulnerable community members with different contexts. And how do we converge those factors to be able to really set up a model where communities can feed themselves and be autonomous with that context? So with that, since we've launched, of course, COVID has been a major player on the table for all of us. And last year we actually had to pivot because last year was supposed to initiate the launch of our additional food spaces in East Port of Spain. But because of COVID, we had to pivot to focusing on home gardening. And we did that under the umbrella of the Plant Your Plate initiative. So we focused more on the individual level because, of course, we weren't able to mobilize and get together with communities as we used to and we wanted to. Right. However, fortunately, we did see a small window in terms of gathering numbers over the past 2 months or so. And we were able to successfully begin the process of launching our food spaces in East Port of Spain. And last weekend, we launched the Chinapu community garden. And of course, that's a partnership that was only possible, not just through Jeff, but also the Chinapu Village Council. So in terms of impact of the work, directly as it pertains to the communities that we are serving, that we are in partnership with, of course, it's about food security. It's about enabling that deeper and quicker access to healthy food that communities grow themselves and can access in a time when person's food bill, I mean, the average food bill on a monthly basis, it is astronomical, and people have lost their jobs because of COVID. And there's just a deeper context of vulnerabilities. And again, reinforcing the importance and value of an initiative like this. Extending to that as it pertains to the impact on our volunteers, because we are an organization centered upon people developing and driving these type of interventions. For us, there's also been the value in terms of breaking the barriers and stigmas that traditionally would be associated with some of these communities, and connecting volunteers to these communities so they can also benefit from understanding the value of these communities and also the value that it brings in terms of working with these communities. So in all, there certainly has been challenges because of COVID, but I think we are seeing very much positive trends in terms of, over a short term, the positive impact of interventions like this, and of course reinforcing what can happen if we perhaps revise what our urban spaces can contribute as it pertains to food. Because yes, there are small spaces, but we can do some very innovative things within these small spaces.
Okay, I really like that, and fantastic in terms of the inclusion now of Chinapu and more areas, especially in the vulnerable areas and so-called hotspots per se, especially when it comes to food security. You would have spoken about COVID and of course the entire pandemic that we're in as being one of the challenges. Can you identify if there were any environmental challenges as well as possibly any other major project challenges and how you may have been able to overcome?
Sure. I think if I think back to our pilots, and you think about the context and profile of an urban space, right? You're thinking of traffic, definitely low space. You're also thinking of things like pollution, littering, and so forth. But the initial pilot we did, actually, when we first did the site visit, it was being used to dump garbage, right? And underutilized and unutilized. Now, of course, with the concept of leveraging unutilized and underutilized spaces to provide food, I think it really expands the opportunities in terms of what sort of biodiversity can exist within our urban spaces, and again, the additional value added as it pertains to food security. One of the main challenges that definitely comes to mind has been the concept, and it's the number one question we get when we say, you know, we are expanding food parks across East Port of Spain. Everybody wants to know, so how you'll get the land, right? Where you'll get the land. I mentioned earlier, and I think it's important for me to say it again, that at VCTT, we really, really live the principles of collaboration. When we coordinate for our partners to come around the table, it really is from a context of what are your strengths. Our strengths as an organization is around mobilizing people, right? Other stakeholders that this would have not been possible without, absolutely not possible without, are the community-based organizations. I spoke earlier about the village councils, tremendous support they have lent to ensuring that this process is possible. The Chinapoo, in terms of the launch we recently had, with Chinapoo, that was possible because Chinapoo gave us permission in terms of the land that they have oversight over to use to develop into a food park. The Port of Spain City Corporation from inception as well has been a tremendous support. Challenges, there are real challenges, but all things being considered, a tremendous support in terms of providing that approval for use of these land spaces, unused and underutilized land spaces across East Port of Spain. It's still, we have been able to secure approval for land spaces through very strategic partnerships and collaborations, but it's still a work in progress because there are other spaces that we have our eyes on as it pertains to real benefit for food parks of significant sizes in some of these communities. And of course, we're working with the relevant state agencies, community-based organizations to see how we can secure that approval. So, yeah.
Has anything been like surprising to you? I think you would have spoken a bit about it, especially when it comes to that, at least seeing the support coming in from all of the different groups and everything. But is there anything you think you're working on that could become global then, in terms of global impact with what you're currently doing, or with any other project that VCTT may have?
Yeah. As it pertains to surprising, I wouldn't necessarily say surprising, but what I would say is it really underscores that we do have a lot of the core ingredients to do what needs to be done in Trinidad and Tobago. These communities have space, right? These communities are also characterized by community personnel who are passionate about their communities and want to see their communities positively progress and move forward, right? So within that, I feel as if, and I mean, we all understand the arguments as it pertains to the role of government, the role of the states, and so forth. But in my mind, the concept of if there would, in my mind, I'm convicted that, you know, there really should be a national priority around using these underutilized spaces in our communities so that communities can feed themselves, right? In our earlier pilot, what we did was a lot of the product from the gardens, it wasn't sold in markets, let's say in other communities, it was resold within the communities themselves. So even the distance that persons from the communities have to go to get fresh, healthy products and so forth, the dynamics of that changed. So again, a lot of real viable values, right? coming from a potential model around the food park initiative. As it pertains to what you asked around the global context, what I would say to that, we're in a space now, if there's been some benefits to COVID, I feel as if one of it, at least for the Volunteer Center of Trinidad and Tobago, there's been real intentional emphasis from the international volunteer community to connect the global volunteer community in some measure, right? And that is being driven by the International Association for Volunteer Effort. Yes. And what I would say is the challenges we are facing in terms of really defining how do we leverage small spaces, the need to feed many persons, and also ensuring that these things can be done at low cost, right? These models should be viable without the investment or support from an organization like ours. Those challenges are not unique to Trinidad and Tobago or our urban context. And I think a continuous best practice that we need to be leaning into is really about exchanging ideas, exchanging best practices, and lending support, really meaningfully pursuing collaboration so that we can just better utilize the resources that we have available to us, especially in these uncertain times.
I like that. And as I say too, it's all about sharing and the knowledge sharing, and of course being a community, not just us here in Trinidad and Tobago, but of course internationally. So thank you, Giselle, in terms of that conversation and what's going on with VCTT. So we move over now. We shift actually over to Shift Caribbean in terms of Phillis, if she's there. Phillis, are you there? To speak a bit in terms of what's going on with Shift Caribbean currently. I'm seeing Jennifer, but I'm not seeing Phillis. All right, well, we'll go ahead, Jennifer. So out of Habitat for Humanity, because I know you all may have some projects, of course, going on now with all that's taking place with the world, but give us a bit in terms of what's some of the work that's going on with the organization, and then what projects that are currently taking place under the small grants.
Right. Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Trust you're hearing me loud and clear. So in terms of Habitat for Humanity, if I could just condense all that we do into maybe some simple phrases, and perhaps also link it to the SDGs, because we're very fussy about the link to the SDGs. Everybody probably already know Habitat for Humanity is an international brand, and the affiliate in Trinidad and Tobago has been in existence since 1997. The specific purpose for which we were set up as an NGO is mainly to advocate for the rights of decent housing and sustainable community development. Very, very key to the work Habitat does is partnerships. And so I'm hoping that even in this presentation, I am reaching out to some of you that have NGOs, say, let's discuss how we can have symbiotic relationships going forward. Habitat does 15 different products. I don't want to go into all of them. Most people only know us addressing housing and housing matters, land issues, but it's way beyond that. We do a lot of community-based mapping, training, vulnerability exercises, dealing with disaster risk reduction in our community, disaster mitigation. There's a lot of work that we're doing. We right now is responding in St. Vincent with hygiene kits. But beyond that, we are saying to our population in Trinidad and Tobago, get prepared, join our Habitat disaster program. So there's a lot of disaster training that's online, that is available, grab it. So
great.
The vision of
and
Habitat,
I like that as well. Sorry about that. Like that as well. And I just added the links both for the website and Facebook. And we're really appreciative. I know our brothers and sisters are really appreciative of what you're currently doing for them in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Going back to Habitat on the vision, a world where everyone has a decent place to live.
Yeah.
Linked to the SDGs, I really want to mention just a couple of them and how it's linked. Goal number 11, we're particularly proud of goal number 11 because we got that onto the map. Over the years, the UN have not been focusing so much on cities and houses and communities. And so Habitat was able to position themselves to make sure that goal number 11 get onto that list. So we're responsible for that, and particularly proud because goal number 11 talks directly about Habitat's mandate, providing affordable access to shelter interventions. We talk about safe and inclusive shelter services, which is way beyond housing. It's dealing with land and infrastructure issues, community resiliency, and all of that. Goal number 1 that deals with no poverty. Adequate housing is directly linked to poverty and vulnerability. Gender equality, we have found that equal access to housing is directly linked to discriminatory practices in many of our countries. The discriminatory policies, if we can focus on gender equality, then land distribution, titling, inheritance issue, all of those will get women much more empowered. Access to clean water and sanitation as goal number 6, directly focused on adequate housing, safe housing, healthy housing. Goal number 7, affordable and clean energy, which is where the project for Jeff lands. So I'm going to stop on our links to UN. And I know you did ask about Habitat, and you want me to answer how we embarked on this project too with Jeff, right?
Well, yeah, why you decided to, yes, if you can. I guess how it links to the UN goals. Great. So with all that linkages, we had this model community, a community that really is an exemplar of communities in Trinidad and Tobago, cashew gardens, scattered on the outskirts of Chaguanas there. A community that had a couple of issues. One, it suffered from seasonal flooding, waterlogging issues, pest issues, but they had an agricultural land that they were tilling and toiling in their own little way, and the productivity was extremely low. We also found that a lot of youths were not participating in the agricultural program. Habitat had a number of housing programs in cashew gardens, and the families were not making their mortgage payments. So we decided to investigate what was the challenge. The challenge was an employment issue. Women had to take the children at 9 school and pick them up at 2. And so nobody wanted to hire them because they couldn't go to traditional 8 to 4 jobs. So we said, bingo, that's a project that we can look at income generating opportunities. And that's what triggered the whole initiative to get started, apart from the community being a model community that was ready and rearing to take on a large challenge. Yeah. I really like that. And it seems like, so from that, and how long has this project been going on? Okay, so the project was supposed to be a 1-year project. The project extended beyond a year. When I get to the challenges, I'll explain why that timeline was extended. But the project itself is a renewable energy hydroponic solar greenhouse system, never before done in Trinidad and Tobago in a community. And so we said, thank you, and thank you to that Cashew Gardens community. Hats off to them. What they decided to focus on was to look at a model that was developed by the University of the West Indies and adapted in the Cashew Gardens. This model was particularly designed by them. Habitat was no expert in greenhouse methodologies. We've never before done it in Trinidad and Tobago. And so we came in just as the project managers in the initial phase. We wanted to make sure that it addressed those issues that I mentioned that the community were facing with lack of youth involvement, empowerment for women, address the flooding issues, address the pest issues, and so on. And so when this model was created, what we did, we set a goal. The goal for the community was to make sure that the community understood that the project must be owned and managed by them, that it was going to be a climate smart agricultural greenhouse, and it must contribute to the sustainability of the community. They already had a community center, and so we wanted them to have income generating opportunities. You were asking something? No, just said right as well too, but you started to say about some of the issues. So what were some of the impacts that has been going on with this project since inception, or since at least your involvement? Right. So the impact on the community is that we've had
the community was already functioning as an active group. They just got more involvement from the youths, from the women, and the particular impact here, they created the livelihood opportunities that we were looking for. The youths were involved in the training and the planting activities, so they were trained. The women were able to do their chores. Well, when COVID happened, they were at home. But before the COVID and after the lockdown was somewhat addressed, the women were able to do other chores, go out and do other things in the communities, and still come and attend to the community garden activities. The other impact that we found is that the contribution to the climate smart initiatives was a great impact on the community. They were able to deal with the energy renewable resources in a very efficient way. They got involved in climate change projects way beyond the benefits of this project. They started looking at recycling. They started looking at composting. So they were ahead of the game in future thinking. So the beneficiaries got much more involved than when we started out with just this solar greenhouse.
Yeah, and that's really great. And again, too, based on what we're saying in terms of really from the initial start, you're connecting people, yes, to what they need to do, but then now you're creating the leaders because they're moving a step further with what they're doing. And of course, it helps people at the end in environmental situations as well, to the composting and just being green and of course, looking at sustainable practices. So that's really great to hear. But what do you think? Do they have any environmental challenges, however, though, with anything?
Well, they had two major challenges. They had the pest challenge, and so the solar system and the hydroponic, because it was an enclosed system, it addressed the pests and they were able to control the pests.
Nice.
That was one of the major ones. The use of the solar panels also assisted them because electricity was a challenge.
Okay.
And so adding the electricity, it helped power the batteries, and the batteries powered the system.
Okay, and I know too, there were flooding issues. So what happened after in terms of the green?
So in the flooding issues, how was that addressed? We got Adopt a River to become a partner in the project, and we were able to do rainwater harvesting. So parts of the project kept expanding, like a progressive elaboration in any new project. And that's what kept happening. And so we decided, okay, water is the issue on the ground. The land was soaking. We needed community drains. We had to develop a partnership and have drains done. Then we took the water off of the roof and put it into tanks using the rainwater harvesters. And so the community was trained on how to do the first flush and how to handle rainwater harvesters. And so the water is coming out directly off of the roof into water tanks. So no longer was the water on the land flooding the land. So that was contained. Yes. So that was really
I think so too. And then of course you spoke about partnerships at the beginning, and you're seeing it here now that they're working with Adopt a River out of WRA and Wassa, and then the getting the drains done as well too. And of course getting the community involved in all of these things, because you said that you train them, but then you help them at the end that they then can manage the projects. So you're seeing that the impact as well too as a positive one. Were there any surprising things that came up throughout going through this project with any of the partners or anything?
Yes. I don't know of any project that don't have surprising
of course. And then you're dealing with people as well too. So
this was no exception. And in sharing those challenges, I'm probably gonna talk about some lessons learned that others developing either new projects or similar projects. Take note of
that's actually what, at the end too, I actually wanted to ask those if you can give us some advice for people who are doing new projects. So when you give any challenges, if you could give us lessons learned, we would love that.
Great. Excellent. So some of the surprising challenges, we did not cater for this kind of heat that Trinidad has. Nowhere in the structure and in the design, I think our UE folks did not cater for the heat. And so the system was not designed for that. The second thing was that we implemented the system when it was a rainy season. So it was fine. When we decided to test it in the heat, the plants were dying. And so we had a serious lesson learned. The hydroponic system now has to be revised, and the pipes have now got to be relocated and done differently. So a drip system now has to be reconfigured, and that's a major lesson learned. One of the other lessons learned is that we need to document any design of a new project and make sure all stakeholders have that document in hand. That's a major lesson learned. One of our major partners, I'm not calling anybody's name, pulled out. There was conflict with the community. I heard in one of the other presentations, they had a similar situation with conflict with people. This one was conflict with one of the major partners. And they couldn't work together. Reconciliation and conciliation and mediation of all kinds could not work. And so we decided, okay, we're in here to make sure this project gets to the end. We had to know, Habitat had to now become an expert in solar greenhouses overnight. So we had to do a lot of research. We had to get other persons involved. We had to some extent, redesign parts of the project. And now we have a very successful greenhouse, but that was a serious lesson learned. Document, and give all parts.
So you hear that, guys? Yeah, so give documentation for everyone involved. And as you see, once it's in black and white, we have it. Everyone has agreed upon it as well. And then you have it for, as you said, the lessons learned will help someone else later on too.
Yes. The other thing was you need to make sure that when you estimate your timelines and their new projects, you need to please make sure you leave enough slack time, contingency time, variable time. I mean, nobody understood there was a COVID coming down the line and you can't plan for that. But certainly you need to factor in those kind of things, because when you think that the project is going to end in a year, it went to 18 months.
Wow.
That's a significant delay because of all of those variables. There was COVID, there was major partner pulling out, there was redesign of the system, both the solar, because the other lesson learned was that the heat on the solar had to be calculated for the batteries that were implemented. Now, nowhere anybody explained that there was a whole scientific calculation that had to be done, and we learned the hard way. It also affected cost, as you can imagine. And so we had to have other partners coming on board to help fund the project to make sure that it came through. So those were some of the challenges and some of the lessons learned.
Okay, like that. And I'm just presenting, you know, of course, the document and of course, leave time, contingency time, and sometimes contingency resources, because especially if you expand on time, that means cost as well. And then you may lose people along the way. So you have to think about a human resource as well too. In terms of people, they would have given you a certain amount of time and you've gone over. Yeah, so thank you so much for that, Jennifer. We'll come back to you at the end. I'm not too sure, I'm not seeing her right now, if Phillis is there with us.
All right, can I just share one last comment? One last comment. One of the surprising things that came out of this project for us that I want people to understand, I did mention the heat. So when you're designing greenhouses, please be careful that you address the Trinidad heat, because lots of the projects, if they're designed in North America, they certainly don't cater for the Caribbean heat. But also, please look at your water containment when you're developing projects. Look at your soil level. Do some soil testing. Sometimes we don't want to spend money to do testing on lands. It's very important to do soil testings, because those things are invariably linked to successful projects of this nature. All right.
Thank you so much for that. I'm not too sure yet if Phillis is there, but we'll, while we're waiting, Giselle, we'll just bring you back in. Because I know we would have spoken global impacts. We know Habitat for Humanity and what they do in terms of the global impact. But in terms of like any advice you think you can offer currently for VCTT or anyone possibly trying to start or do something similar in terms of VCTT or even with the project that you're currently doing.
Great recommendations as well, Mrs. Massiah.
Very good.
In terms of for anyone who may be initially starting a project, I would say, for example, the Jeff process, part of the Jeff process in terms of project rollout. It really has a structured process, which I think has benefit to anyone doing a project. Part of that, of course, includes doing a log frame for your project, right? And within that process, of course, you have your objective that the project is seeking to achieve, the outcomes, and all of the activities that contribute towards that. And I mean, as basic and as simple as that may sound from a project management perspective, I think using existing tools to support with organizing how a project rolls out is really, really important. So the utilization of a tool such as a log frame, I think, is really important, and that would be a #1 recommendation. The second recommendation, and I think we learned a lot of lessons with this, especially in the pilot project, is to really have that long vision of not just 6 months from now what this project is going to look like, but 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, realistically speaking, what is this project going to look like? And I think very often, sometimes we speak about community ownership, but that requires, and Mrs. Massiah, I'm not sure what your experience was with the project that you all were doing, but that really requires a specially curated strategy depending on the community you're working with. And depending on the project, it may mean months, sometimes months of working with the community, developing relationships before you can actually go in and begin to strategize together with partners in a community. So it's not an overnight fix, and I want to use the word fix. It certainly isn't overnight impact. For a lot of the work that needs to be done, it really does require that long view approach to it. So organizations or individuals really should have a think about, realistically speaking, what does that look like and what do we put in place? I mean, very often when we talk about community buy-in, we identify stakeholders from the communities that, you know, we can work with to share that ownership or what have you. But again, the strategy around that really needs to be carefully curated. Within that as well, of course, and Mrs. Massiah spoke to it in terms of very often when, I mean, things don't go as planned. COVID was a classic example. And you do have to pivot some of your key input items like a budget. They are affected. They really are affected. And at that point, I really want to reemphasize the point I was making again about collaborations, right? About the need for partnerships and ensuring that in the planning of the project that those collaborations are there, identified, possible partners are identified, understanding what would be the key assets needed for the project and how could we bring stakeholders together around those objectives. I see our colleague Phillis is back.
Yes, I've seen that. I actually like the point that you ended on as well too, because I have that in my notes for both of what you were saying, especially when it comes to partnerships. We are, yes, speaking about people power, and one of the things for sure is collaboration and partnerships with all beneficiaries involved and everyone that may be impacted by any type of project that you're doing. So we move over now, Phillis, if you're there. Thank you for joining us, coming back with us. Hope you're there with us now. Let's talk a bit about Shift in terms of Shift Caribbean. If you could give us a bit of the organization and what's currently taking place in terms of the funding that you're receiving, any new projects.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm having some issues now with my video, but I believe my audio is working perfect. So
yes, I think we are hearing you pretty well.
Great. Okay, so thank you again for this opportunity. I'm really excited, and I'm also excited to represent Shift Caribbean on this virtual Eco-Symposium. So let me tell you a little bit about Shift. So Shift Caribbean, we are dedicated to creating real, sustainable, and just change in the Caribbean. And we do this through consistent actions and creating a community of leaders. Our workshops build capacity of leaders to effectively design projects that focus on the root causes of problems. So we don't only just focus on the symptoms, and it's also going to have a long-term effect. Our funding from the UN Jeff Fund, or the Small Grants Project, we focused on children's residences. And One of the biggest impacts that we got is that when we thought the children would not get what we wanted them to get, they got it. So we focused on leadership, environment, and entrepreneurship. So we wanted to build from youth, go up. Some of the impacts that we had was that the beneficiaries, meaning the children of the residences,
Yes.
they gained a sense of belonging and being heard. We allowed them to speak up. We allowed them to be a part of what it is we wanted to produce. They had a say in it. We networked with a lot of persons, so groups like the Keys Foundation and the 2 Cents Movement, we partnered with them and they assisted us. We also focused on the residences becoming sustainable and also creating some form of income generation. The children learned about composting, recycling, upcycling, and stuff like that. And some of our challenges were trying very hard to avoid single-use plastics. So that was something all of us had to get accustomed to, even in terms of challenging your waste. Instead of throwing it into the trash, using it for your compost heap.
Right.
So that was something
ways to recycle.
That's right. So that was something all of us had to get accustomed to. Eventually, we got the hang of it, and even the children got the hang of it. And that was like a major breakthrough for all of us. One of the things that came out of that is that persons became more conscious about those single-use bottles.
Yes.
So you'd find out people would come with their own bottles. Even utensils, even the utensils, you found some people started to walk with their own utensils instead of having to use the plastics and to throw them and so on.
Throw them, yeah.
Yeah.
And I like that because it's an environmental challenge. And of course, shout out as well to the New Fire Festival and team that it's something that they would have started from jump when we were doing all of these, the different events. It was a bit of a challenge, but people, I think, after the first day or second day after you've done this 2-3 day event, you had to walk with, there were no single use allowed. You know, so you had to walk with your containers, your forks and everything like that. It is a mind change, it's a mindset change, and it's something that doesn't happen overnight. So I'm glad as well too that for the younger ones and even for your team, that it's something that you had to kind of have a shift in what you're doing and understand as well to the importance of not using or at least trying ways to reduce the single-use plastics. When you were the ages that you were working with, in terms of the children, from what age, what were the age groups?
The youngest, I believe, was age 7, and I believe we went up to 18.
7 to 18, yeah. So I like that too, that, you know, the younger ones are, and everyone is getting on board with learning about being an entrepreneur, learning about the environment, and of course, leadership. You spoke a bit about environmental challenges, but were there any other major project challenges you would have had working with some of the residences?
Coming up with creative ideas for the workshop for the children. So we had to dig deep. Again, we network with people. So I brought in some of my creativity because my background is education. And I just looked at it from a child's perspective or point of view. And as I said initially, when we thought that they may not get it, they got it.
Yeah, so children are resilient as well too. So I think in certain instances we sometimes undervalue or sometimes don't underestimate youth and what they are capable of, no matter their circumstance and situation.
Yes, we do. And just the fact too that the children were given that opportunity to really have an input, really say, okay, why don't you all try this? And we did.
Yeah.
So they got that access to their true selves. They got that access to letting their voices be heard. also, they mattered. They mattered. So it wasn't just adults telling them.
Yeah, so their opinion
Yes,
and what they thought
that's
was
right.
significant, which is great. And congratulations on something on that project and what you're currently doing. How long has this project been running?
So also initially it really was for 1 year, and we got extra funding. Yes. So again, because of COVID, we had to slow down on some of the activities and so on. But we are looking at restarting everything. Alicia has been in contact with the residences, and we are putting things in place to have a restart of everything.
That sounds great. I look forward to seeing more in terms of what Shift is currently doing with that. Do you think currently, in terms of your organization's work, is there any way that, or have you already done in anything that's been impacted in terms of global impact? How might your work possibly impact things globally, or is that a plan if you haven't done that already?
So I believe that what we need to do is just keep doing what we're doing. We also had, I believe it was 2 documentaries relating to the project. So that was another way for us to follow through and follow up on how things began and where they have reached. So I believe if the wider community would be able to gain access or to see the documentaries, they would get a better understanding as to what it is we would like to achieve and accomplish. And again, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing.
Right. And in terms of that, the access for this, or do you have plans it's going to be shared globally, of course, or at least internationally?
Yes.
Good to hear. And in terms of like what you've been doing currently, like if you had to offer advice to someone who wants to do something similar, what would you share or tell someone?
My feedback would be to collaborate and share your ideas, and don't think that what you have to offer or someone else has to offer will not work. It possibly may not fit into your project, but it could certainly assist someone else with their project. So collaborate, share, come up with these crazy ideas, and just know that they will work.
So collaborate, and I see that it's been a key and a theme amongst all the ladies in terms of what they're speaking about: partnerships, collaborations. I know you would have spoken a bit of your projects, your challenges as well, but was there anything surprising while doing this project outside of trying to find those creative ideas for the youth? Was there anything else surprising for you in this project?
We did have one of the residences who decided that they would not want to participate again. We really couldn't figure out exactly what happened there, but initially we really hoped that we would have gone through with all of them. So what we did, we just graciously said, well, okay, if this is your choice, then we're okay with it.
Yeah, and like at least you went forward, as you say, because I know Jennifer, well, on the other side, in terms of a sponsor, actually not wanting to be a part of it anymore, but now you're actually having a beneficiary pulling out. But sometimes, as you say, just kind of move forward with what you have to do. You still have objectives to fulfill, and there's a vision for the project. So it's just to move forward with it. And I'm glad that you are currently moving forward with what you're doing for the residents. So again, that's the theme again. It's about collaboration, it's about community, it's about partnership, and really putting your best foot forward and working with the right people. I know there was one comment in here before we wrap up for VCTT. I'm trying to find it. I think it was Chandel. She's saying with volunteering spaces, with training, do volunteers undergo in VCTT? Because I'll recommend anti-oppression training any day.
Yeah, thank you. I actually had an additional comment. Thank you for that comment, Chandel. As it pertains to the training, so pre-intervention, and of course we have 3 specific interventions. We actually develop customized training based on the needs of the intervention, and also it focuses on building the capacity of the volunteers to be able to respond to and activate around those needs. So training is definitely a critical part of how we organize our intervention. So thank you very much for that recommendation, Chandel. I also had an additional comment, Aileen, and I know we beaten the point around collaboration, but I just wanted to, I forgot to mention, and I think it's very important in terms of how at VCTT we administer our interventions. We do it via a steering committee of volunteer experts. So we have a project manager, and that's a paid or resource position, but based on the needs and the goals of the project, we recruit a multi-stakeholder steering committee of specialists and mobilize them, all voluntary, of course, to support with the oversight, management, and delivery of the specific intervention. So again, just in terms of the how-to, as it pertains to collaboration, for us, it actually is an emerging best practice in terms of that steering committee approach to administration, and it defines how we do all of our interventions. And the second point I wanted to make, because of course this is the people power segment, is around volunteering. And I think for a lot of the work that we are undertaking, I mean, I really encourage organizations and NGOs, community-based organizations, to really have a deep think about how we can meaningfully engage and manage, right, and sustain our relationship with volunteers. And because from our experience, organizations have different types of experiences or mechanisms for recruiting, managing, and mobilizing volunteers. There are a lot of persons, especially now, who have a wealth of skills and gifts that they can contribute to the work that we're doing. So especially for NGOs, community-based organizations, if engaging volunteers in the work that you are doing to support with achieving those goals isn't part of your strategy, we would certainly recommend it.
It's something that you do, yeah. Because and I like what you're saying that as well too. We are talking about people power. It's really in terms of, even if you need some mentor persons, volunteering is the best way to start in terms of doing any of these things. And of course, we have the volunteer center here with us. The links are all in the chat, and it is something that can assist in moving things forward, really strengthening communities, strengthening any project that you're doing. And of course, just building on your partnerships. It builds on your CSR and of course, sustainability at the end of the day. And the main thing as well too, outside of the partnerships that we're building and the people that we're building, we're trying to create more leaders. So that's the thing as well too. So besides us working together, we're really trying to find some ways that we can hand off what we're doing, the best knowledge transfer that we have that goes into leadership. And then of course, just makes a better world at the end of the day. So I don't know if there are any questions coming out from the chat, but I would have shared all of the links for all of the ladies here and their wonderful work that they've been doing. And I think if there are no questions, we can start wrapping up. And I just wanted to, again, end on a quote that we would have had on the page that would have said, leaders become great not because of their power, but because of their ability to empower others. So I think that is coming from John C. Maxwell. That is something that we really need to consider in terms of, not just working together, but empowering others as well to get that people power moving to empowerment and leadership. So thank you again, ladies. And thank you, of course, Massiah, for the opportunity. And before we wrap up, if we have no questions, thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Anne-Marie. And well, I know you would have answered Chandel's question. Jennifer, do you have anything else to say before we wrap up? You are wrapped up. You are muted. I think Phillis, we lost Phillis once again. You're still muted, Jack.
I do. If I would like to share a parting comment. I just thought of something while we were chatting. And I also want to share a comment of what we plan to do in the future. So I'll start with what we plan to do in the future. And it's something I want to encourage our NGOs to do. We don't like to be vulnerable, but it's the only way that we can strengthen our other sisters and brothers in the NGO world. And so I want to ask that, when we do lessons learned, look at the hard, difficult things learned and share it. And so I would like to do that even with this particular project. I'd like to put that in a paper and invite regional players as well as the farmers to critique the particular model and then see if we can have a best practice paper that we can share so that others can benefit it.
I love that. That is
to learn.
That is fantastic. And yeah, I really appreciate that. And even Giselle is saying thumbs up as well. We, as I said, sometimes we don't share. We share when we do.
We don't want to be vulnerable.
Exactly. Yeah. We share the positives, but not when the challenges we don't. And the lessons learned, as you say, would help so many others.
Right. And my last comment that I want to share is that let's take a GEF approach Make sure the innovation that you're going to do has great impact. That's G. E, it must be easy enough to be implemented. And F, it must be flexible and adaptable. So that's my GEF quote for you. Any new project, great impact, easy enough to be implemented by community members after you would have left, so it can be sustainable. And the F, flexible and adaptable, or else the community wouldn't be able to tango and maneuver the various challenges that they may encounter long after you leave. God bless. This was a blessing for Habitat to be here, and thank you so much for selecting us.
Thank you so much, Ms. Massiah. Thank you so much, Giselle. And Phillis, I know you're not here with us right now, but thank you. Thank you so much, ladies. And thank you for joining us for this session. And we're wrapping up this afternoon, actually. So from this session, we're actually going over to Jerry Williams, who will give a review of what happened today. So thank you guys for being here with us.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, take care.